This episode of The Athletic Mind Unleashed has somebody again from the other side of the world. So I'm in Estonia and he's in Vietnam. And I would say that Billy Lahr has quite an interesting story to tell because he is also, I would say, he's kind of like a digital nomad. I talk about digital nomads and a healthy lifestyle a lot, but he only started doing it after a complete burnout and after, I don't know, like midlife crisis. And then 3 years ago, he decided, oh, I'm just gonna go and travel. And he's also an educator. He's also teaching all things that he's discovering on his own journey to other people. And he talks about something very, very interesting that is called mindful midlife crisis. So I'm not going to go into this much more. I think, Billy, maybe you can introduce what it's all about, the mindful midlife crisis, and you traveling in the midlife ages.
Yeah. So I hosted a podcast called The Mindful Midlife Crisis. And, I like the contrast of that because you think of a crisis, you think of the agony that goes into being in a crisis. But then when you think about mindfulness, you think about there's an idea of calm that comes to that. And really, what mindfulness is just the awareness of what is present without judgment. And to recognize that you are in crisis is really, truly mindful. So I knew that I was navigating some transitions in my life and I'm 46, so right around midlife here. And I wanted to be able to do that mindfully. I wanted to be able to sit with whatever experiences and whatever thoughts and whatever emotions were coming up in a mindful way so that I could respond to them as opposed to react to them and not get pulled out into the depths of whatever emotional and not get pulled out into the depths of some emotional ocean or not get swept up in a tornado of negativity where I would recognize when these thoughts were pulling at me and I'd be able to hit the pause button and say, rather than saying to myself, you're not good enough, I would reframe that and say, you're thinking you're not good enough. Because then you're holding that thought out and you're plucking it from you rather than letting it kind of fester and marinate inside of you and become piece of you. You're holding out, you're saying, oh, this is a thought that I'm having. So where is that thought coming from? And then in doing so, I've recognized where that thought is and what the origin of that thought is or how that thought is affecting me somatically. And then I can say, all right, now I'm letting you go. And then another thought might come and I can be present with that. In doing so, then it is more of me managing my thoughts as opposed to succumbing to those thoughts because what I have found is that a lot of our thoughts, they tend to lean negative. Why does that happen? It happens because we're in survival mode. And so our negativity bias has actually kept us alive for millions of years. It's an evolutionary trait, it's a survival trait. But we don't have the same dangers, we don't have the same threats as they had thousands of years ago. But we still have that animal brain, the amygdala. But then how do we develop parts of our brain like the prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotion, so that when we feel a sense of danger, when we feel threatened, but it's not really a life-threatening situation, but we internalize it as such, how are we able to pluck that thought out and see it for what it really is? And to me, that is how I have been navigating this mindful midlife crisis, especially as someone who has been nomadic for the last 2.5 years.
Have you always been mindful, or when did it actually came into your life, this mindfulness practice?
Yeah, so about 11 years ago, it was 2013, I was really struggling with my mental health. and I was experiencing anxiety attacks, and those anxiety attacks were manifesting into depression, and that depression was manifesting into suicidal ideation. So I was really at my emotional rock bottom, and I was feeling a great sense of rejection both in my personal life and in my professional life. So that was not helping matters any either. Then I was having conversations with my best friend, and he has his PhD in forensic neuropsychology. Not a bad person to have in your corner, but when we started having these conversations, he was saying to me, listen, if what you're sharing with me is really how you are feeling, you need to work with a therapist, because these are some really dark thoughts that you are having. So I started working with a therapist by the name of Mindy Bendixson. Anytime I do an interview, I always mention Mindy Bendixson's name because she is the one who introduced me to mindfulness. And I credit Mindy and I credit mindfulness for not only changing my life, but most likely saving it as well. I started working with her twice a month, and we worked together for 6 months, and she would give me these mindfulness exercises to do both in her office and at home. I found that when I started the next school year, one of my students, I remember this clear as day, one of my students said, Mr. Lahr, you seem like you're in a better mood this year. And that was what sealed the deal for me. Like, oh, this that I am doing, this is actually having an impact on my mood. And it's so palpable that even other people, even teenagers, are recognizing this. One of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me is, Billy, when you're excited about something, you want everyone else to be excited about it too. So I thought to myself, well, gosh, if this mindfulness thing can help a nut job like me, a spaz like me, maybe it can help other people too. Let me learn more about this, because I have a real deep desire to teach people. I mean, I lucked out. I was working in education for 21 years. I feel like I was in the right profession that whole time. But then I wanted to share my story with other people, and I wanted to share some of the tips and some of the strategies that I had used in order to manage these really strong emotions that I had been experiencing, and just that being a highly sensitive person. And in doing so, like I said, I was able to manage these feelings of anxiety and stress. I still have anxiety attacks, but they're far less intense, and they don't last as long as they used to. And able to kind of just see them as a witness to my experience, as opposed to letting it be a part of who I am.
I know that at one point you also said that instead of telling everybody to just follow your passion, you also think that mindfulness is the better route to go. And you should kind of like focus on your strengths and be very mindful about the things that are around you, and be curious and explore, and maybe use more rationality instead. I think also when somebody says follow your passion, passion can be a little bit irrational. It can be all over the place, and it can be kind of this deconstructed as well. So you would recommend instead using mindfulness to find out what to do with your life. Am I correct?
Yeah. So for me, this whole follow your passions mantra is complete and utter nonsense. It's really, really terrible advice to give anybody. Having worked in education, I've heard so many high school graduation commencement speakers tell students, follow your passion. Please stop telling students that. That is terrible advice. It is objectively terrible advice. It is a byproduct. It is a byproduct. And for me, what I have learned through my travels and just even my own experiences is that we first need to figure out what our purpose is. So how do we find our purpose? Well, you mentioned the mindfulness piece of it. Understanding, bringing awareness, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and what are our needs? So if we understand those three things first, then we can kind of build off of that. Then we want to explore our curiosities. What is it that we want to learn more about? Where do we want to be challenged? So we explore those curiosities. And then we find our community who will enrich those curiosities, who will water the seeds of growth within those curiosities that will open up doors to explore curiosities, that will share information or share new insights or challenge us when it comes to those curiosities. And once we do that, then we've identified our purpose. Now we know what it is that we're here to do. But then how do we turn purpose into passion? So when I say it's a byproduct of purpose times consistency times discipline times patience times self-compassion. Now, a lot of coaches talk about the discipline and the consistency. Rarely do they talk about the patience and the self-compassion. Patience gets mentioned from time to time. Self-compassion almost never gets mentioned when we talk about that. The thing is that when we are beginners at something, we suck at it. We are absolutely terrible at it. If I go back and listen to the first 10 episodes of my podcast, it's awful. I learned so much during that time, and the show got better. And the reason why I got better is because I had started having more conversations with people who had podcasts, and I started listening to more podcasts. And that, in a sense, was my crew. So they would challenge me, and I would take those things. And that allowed me to kind of figure out, okay, now I can apply this to my purpose. And my purpose in the podcast was to help people navigate the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. When we are more mindful of what our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities are, and what our needs are, when we're more mindful of how we can be curious and open to exploring our curiosities and how we can connect with other people, then we see what our purpose is, but then the really hard work comes in. And that's the consistency and the discipline and the patience and the self-compassion. And all of that requires us to be present with what is there now. Bring awareness to where we are, awareness to when we are judging ourselves and not being compassionate, when we are being impatient, when we're looking at people who are 20 steps ahead of us and we're comparing ourselves to them. There's nothing wrong with comparison. It's okay to look at somebody and say, compared to them, I'm back here. That's okay. But it's the envy that eats away at us. So then recognizing that if I compare, I'm really just making an observation. This person is here. This person is here. That's a comparison. Envy is when you let judgment into the equation.
You started your Nomad journey 2021, so it's just 3 years ago. Mostly people do it when they're in 20s, very young, and you started it quite later. Did you also feel any moments of comparison when you started being a nomad around that age?
No, it's not. I don't think age plays a role in it so much as an overconsumption of social media. So I find myself at times really struggling with FOMO, the fear of missing out. I find myself in the comparison loop and then adding judgment to it and that turning into envy. The other thing that I found, especially early on, was that people were living vicariously through my travels, and I didn't want to disappoint them. So I felt almost like a need to not take days off from traveling or not take days off of exploring, that I would feel guilty for not making the most of every single day. And now here I am in Hanoi, and to be honest, my goal in Hanoi is really just to be bored, and I'm okay with that. I could schedule all these tours. Hanoi, there isn't a whole lot to experience in Hanoi outside of museums and stuff like that. You've got the food here, and I'm right across the street from one of the lakes, and there's another huge lake. So there's a lot of things that you can experience, especially the food. But then northern Vietnam, where you go up to Sapa and you go up to Ban Giac Falls and the Ha Siang Loop, and there's Ninh Binh, all these day trips that you could take. But for me, there's only so much time, there's only so much energy, and really there's only so much money that I can spend on these trips. So yeah, I could spend thousands of dollars going to check out these things. But one of the reasons why I wanted to take this time was to create, to be creative. And I want to make sure that I set aside time to do that, because travel really isn't my passion. Travel is just something that I'm doing right now. I'm staying in places for a full month at minimum. Depending on what the visa is, a lot of times I'll stay there for 3 months, especially like Korea. I keep going back to Korea because I just love it there. I've made amazing connections with people there, and they have a 90-day visa. I stick it out there for 90 days. And then when it gets cold, I go somewhere warm and cheap, like Thailand, but that only has a 30-day visa that I could extend, but I don't want to go through that hassle. So I come to Vietnam. Vietnam has a 90-day visa for me. I'm looking at those things and asking myself, okay, what is it that I need to experience? And what is it that I think I should experience based on looking at other people's experiences? And how much am I projecting that onto what it is? Am I trying to keep up with the Joneses? Am I saying that the grass is greener on the other side? Am I experiencing FOMO here? And then just recognizing that, okay, there are a couple of things that I really want to do here, but other than that, I've been going to yoga here in Vietnam. So, and that had, interestingly enough, has turned into an opportunity for me to lead mindfulness meditation sessions. So and to be honest, I feel that space that they have created, it's the place is called Hanoi, O-M Hanoi. It's a vegan restaurant. No, I'm not vegan, but they have a restaurant there, and then above that, they have a yoga studio. And that space is just filled with such positive energy. And I'm not like real woo-woo on the energy stuff, but when I'm there, I feel very comfortable. I feel very at ease. And I'm not a yogi by any stretch of the imagination. My hips don't lie like Shakira. My hips tell me you do not bend that way. But I like being there. And I like practicing there because it gets me around people, and I just feel really connected to it. So I'm more intentional around now just having experiences with people. When I go back, I'm going back to Chiang Mai in a couple weeks, and I've already started Googling swing dance because I took swing dance lessons back when I was in college. I haven't done it in a long time, and when it's during the week, what do? I don't have a car to go around. I have a friend that lives there, but she works. So we go into nature on the weekends. What do I do with myself for 8, 9, 10 hours on a weekday? Well, there's swing dance lessons. I think I'll go do that. So just kind of finding those little things that maybe you could do that in any other city in the world, but hey, the people that are in Chiang Mai that are going to these events, the people that are going to do yoga here in Hanoi, those are the things that really, to me, stick out more so than this overstimulation of seeing this and seeing this and seeing this and taking pictures of here and here and here and here. I'm kind of tapped out of that at this point.
Yeah.
So for me, what sticks is the connections.
It sounds like you're doing this the bit slower kind of traveling, and you're also just kind of tasting the atmosphere and just feeling, okay, how would it feel like to live in here? You're going to
Mm-hmm.
classes, going to the yoga classes. And yeah, I also like that kind of traveling when you can have time and just test out how it feels like to actually be like a local. So it's so one way to
Yes.
do the nomading. But do you have any kind of daily routines that also support you whenever you are traveling and wherever you are going?
Yeah, that's the one thing I've struggled keeping routines here. When I am in a routine, that's when I feel the most whole. That's when I feel like the clearest in my mind. That's when I feel the most productive. So I set my alarm for 6:30 every day. The reason why I do that is because the research shows that waking up at the same time is actually more important than going to bed at the same time. Now, if you wake up at the same time, it'll start cueing your body to start going to sleep at the right time. So I wake up at 6:30 every single day. I get out of bed probably about 6:45, and I take my shower, and then I eat the oatmeal every day. Every morning I eat oatmeal with honey and banana and peanut butter, and if I can find cinnamon wherever I am, I throw some cinnamon on there too. That's my daily breakfast. I never get sick of it. I just really enjoy it. So that's part of the routine. My Airbnb host here in Hanoi is so sweet. I asked him, where can I buy a cheap yoga mat? And he said, I have a yoga mat that I never use. You can just use mine. So he brought it over, and I have like this, I call it a butt ball, but it's basically like a hard massage therapy ball, right? I have this routine that I do. It takes 16 minutes. So there's 16 body parts that I want to do the myofascial release. And I do that. And then I have a 10-minute mobility routine just so I can like wake my body up. And that's my routine in the morning, is just to kind of like wake my body up and then go to work. So whatever it is. Now, when I was feeling more productive, part of that going to work was sitting down and creating what I call a CHIPS list. So C stands for complete. These are the things that have to get done today. They're the 3 to 5 things that absolutely positively have to get done today. You're not putting them off until tomorrow. And then H is hooray, some kind of reward that you will treat yourself, and not food related, not alcohol related, not lifestyle related. So you're not saying to yourself, oh, I'm going to go work out after this. No, that's part of your lifestyle. What's a treat that you're going to give yourself? Maybe you're going to go and hang out with a friend, or maybe you're going to try and schedule a call with somebody, or what have you. But not doing something that's related to food or to alcohol, because then that kind of blurs the line of a healthy relationship with those kinds of things. But then the IPS stands for in progress and start. So those are things that if I have the mental bandwidth, or if I have a desire to start working on those things, I will. So just knowing that those eventually are going to land in the complete column someday. But yeah, that's when I'm really, really in a routine, then I have all those things there, because then I can look at how much I complete throughout the day.
Yeah, I think this is also like an alternative to-do list.
Yeah, I find to-do lists to be, they're just keeping you busy. There's no real intentionality around that, and I'm really big on intentionality. So what is it that I'm intentionally going to complete today? A to-do list can be miles long. There are a lot of things that you could do in a day, but to complete something, that feels like more of an accomplishment. And then you're also prioritizing that as well.
Yeah, this is very, very true. Do you have also any kind of evening routine?
So my evening routine isn't great. This is something that I would need to get better at. When I was at my best, which was before I started traveling, I think traveling kind of throws off my evening routine, simply because, especially in Seoul, even if you have the best intentions of going to bed at 11, you're probably not going to go to bed until 12:30. If you're even going out to dinner with friends, wherever you are in the city is going to be an hour train ride back to wherever you're staying. So you get home late, and then you're kind of unwinding from all that. So my evening routine while I'm traveling sucks. It's really, really difficult. So that's why I like to have that morning routine, because then the morning routine sets the tone for the rest of the day. And then the evening routine is more about just unwinding, but then sometimes too, that's when friends are available to meet up. So then that might interfere with the routine. When I was living in Minnesota full time, I had a better evening routine then that kind of prepared me for bed. the morning routine has always been highest priority. So trying to do the morning routine at least 75% of the time, and then the evening routine when I feel like it.
Yeah, and it sounds that when you're traveling, there's more social connections. So, where do you even find these people when you're switching countries, switching cities? How do you find your tribe again?
Yeah, so I lucked out in Seoul and I found the most amazing group of people through Meetup. Meetup in Seoul is very, very popular. It's very popular in Seoul. There are a lot of hiking groups. I didn't realize how rugged of a country and a city Seoul, Korea is. So there's a lot of places to go hiking. And the nice thing is that the Metro Transit there makes it really accessible to get to all of these trails. So I met a great group of people through Meetup. If you're ever in Seoul, go to Meetup and look up Seoul Share. It's the name of the city, Seoul Share, all one word. You can look them up on Instagram as well. It's Seoul Share 79. The greatest group of people you'll ever meet. Tell them that Billy sent you. But I connected with people that way. I've been starting to use Facebook a little bit more. That's how I found this swing dance group. I just typed in like Chiang Mai dance because I'm trying to challenge myself. I took swing dance lessons back when I was in college. I've taken one bachata lesson in my entire life, and I took one salsa lesson in my entire life. Bachata was a lot more fun. It was a lot easier for me. And I wouldn't mind giving that a shot and just kind of meeting people through there, as long as it's a beginner class and we all understand that we all aren't good at this. We're just having fun and learning how to do it. I don't need to be at a bachata class, and unless the instructor is dancing with me and kind of working with me that way. I think it's just like a little bit of fear that goes into that. But yeah, I found people through that way. If I'm being honest, a lot of people I meet are through dating apps. So Bumble, and it's not about a hookup. It's about, hey, I'm here in this city, and I'm very transparent too. I'm visiting this city for a month, and I'm looking for someone to have fun conversation with and to go out exploring, to help me navigate this city, navigate restaurants. Let's go out to eat. I've met a lot of people that way. Some of them are travelers. Some of them are locals who are like, hey, you seem cool. Let's get together. Let's hang out. So, you just kind of meet people that way. But I also understand that's a very virtual way of meeting people. I like meeting people through tours. I remember last year I did a food tour and met a guy named Edgar, and he and I have stayed in touch. When I was in Chiang Mai just a month ago, I met this couple. They're probably in their 60s, but oh my goodness, the guy he's just a card, man. He's just so funny and so personable and engages everybody around him. And they're in Hanoi. They text me, they're like, hey, we're in Hanoi. I said, let's go get dinner. So we went and got dinner the other night, and now I think they went to Halong Bay, and then they're coming back, and we're going to go out to dinner again. So you're just kind of making those connections with people. There's a nomadic Matt, but there's some things that he says that I'm like, let's stop that for a second. Let's really think about that. He says that even if you're solo traveling, you're not truly by yourself because you always meet people, which is true. You always do meet people. But for me, someone who really values connection, I make these deep connections with people, and then either I leave or they leave, and it amplifies the loneliness and the isolation a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly having people coming in and out of your life. And that's something that I'm navigating as well. It's something that I help digital nomads do through the meditate and mingle sessions that I offer. It's just kind of just helping them recognize that, like you're going to experience this isolation, you're going to experience this loneliness, and it's okay to experience that. And then how do we, again, pluck that from our brain? And we're not plucking it from the brain and discarding it right away. We're plucking it from our brain so that we can look at it, understand what that feeling is, experience it, understand the sensation, the somatics of it, and then say, okay, I'm going to set this off to the side, And now I'm going to move on. And what's my next course of action? Maybe my next course of action is to find another event where I can meet some other people, because we reflect, we learn, we grow, so we stop, we feel, and then we move on.
Yeah, I think I have also realized this because when I was traveling, I was mostly in Barcelona, and I would say that in Barcelona, meetup is also a big thing. And I met most of the people through the meetup, and also I joined a co-working community, and this helped me to, I don't know, have interesting discussions about business. I was participating in business masterminds, and I still go back to Barcelona sometimes. I just arrived yesterday, actually. I was there for just 5 days. I gave like a workshop on the digital nomad health and fitness, and that was like the main reason to go to Barcelona. And I also met one of my business partners because we are organizing a retreat soon. It was just so nice to have this community to go back to. So I'm mostly going to the same place all over again because I fell in love with the place and all the people there. But the people, they're also coming and going. And in Barcelona also has a lot of this fluctuation, and nobody stays for a very long time, or when they stay, that's quite rare. And yeah, I get it. It can get lonely when everybody's always leaving. So, for example, my nomading time, my traveling time started in August last year. I had been traveling before as well, but this is when I went away for a longer time because we had this very big event in Estonia in July. So it was the Mind Valley University. So Mind Valley is this very big online learning platform, and once a year, everybody comes to my country for 3 weeks. It's more than 1,000 people. It's 3 weeks of self development, learning, networking, connections. It's a crazy stuff going on, and all the extra events that everybody is organizing. And suddenly they all left. I was like, oh, why did everybody leave? So I was in my own country. I wasn't even traveling yet, but oh, I feel so
Right.
lonely and disconnected.
Yeah.
It was so awesome, super intense for 3 weeks, and it was like, oh, it's over. So I was like, okay, now
Yeah.
I need to go somewhere. So I went to Barcelona.
You know, one thing I readily admit that I also have English speaking privilege. So one thing that I do is I did this right away when I got to Portugal, because that was my first stop on this endeavor way back in September of 2021, is that I would hear English and just kind of insert myself into those conversations, just to be like, oh, hey, where are you guys from? That sort of thing. And always reading whether or not they want an interloper having, inserting themselves into their conversation. But most people were really, really kind. And I remember one time I was at Virtudes in Porto by myself, and there was a tour just wrapping up, and I was listening, and everybody was speaking English. Some people had accents. I think there was someone from Ireland, there was maybe someone from Germany, and then there were a couple Americans that were all part of this English-speaking tour group. And they were having a good time. They were going to have a drink. And so I just kind of made my way over to them, and I was like, hey, did you guys just get finished up with a tour here? Yeah, we did this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, are you guys going to have a drink? Is it all right if I join you? People are very accepting of that sort of thing. As long as you're not a creep, weird about it. It's not, you're not rude. You just go in and say, oh, hey, would it be okay if I join you? And people are generally really accepting of that. And sometimes it's just enough to have a conversation for an afternoon. The other day I was leaving the yoga studio, and there was a woman there who was practicing in the same session as I was, and she was walking in the same direction that I was. And I'm like, hey, where are you from? And so we just got to chatting. She lives in California, and she was going to a cooking class. And we had a 15-minute conversation. And her name's Sam. I'll always remember Sam because it was very, very nice. We had a really great conversation. And then that was it. That was all we had. So you just kind of have these micro moments, these micro connections that you make. Mm-hmm. But again, being mindful of that, now that's gone, right? Now I can't keep that relationship alive because, and yeah, sure, you could exchange numbers and all that kind of stuff, but the reality is you do that enough, then you got all these numbers in there. Are you really keeping contact with all of them? Probably not. So just kind of being aware that okay, yes, there are going to be connections that you make, but then those people are going to come and go, and that is going to have an effect on you. And that's okay. Just be aware of it and navigate that accordingly.
Yeah. I think I also have very, very, I don't know, wide circle of connections. They are all across the world. Basically, because of Mind Valley, I also studied to be a coach through Mind Valley. And in these calls, it's all online and we meet in Zoom calls to coach each other. I also met people from over the world. But yeah, we have these Mind Valley events. So at least we might meet each other, maybe in my country. I also met some people last year in Texas. I met people in Dubai. Uh, and I also went to Colombia, South America. So I was also traveling for the events and I kept meeting the same people. It is kind of sad when they go away, but we know that, okay, there will be another event. So we will come together again.
Right.
In this community, many people are traveling quite a lot. Sometimes in the
Mm.
group chats, like on WhatsApp, they're also like, oh, I'm in this country. Is anybody around? Is anybody in Thailand? Or is anybody here? Wherever. So I've also actually met people while I was in Barcelona because I knew them
Yeah.
from some other event.
Yeah. I just had lunch with my friend Young today from South Korea. She's visiting Hanoi and she knew that I was in Hanoi. So we went and had lunch together today. So it's, man, it's just awesome having friends all around the world. It gives you an excuse to go visit them.
Yeah, and there's always good to have an excuse to travel. It's kind of like you have maybe a
Yes.
local person waiting for you, so they can also show you around and show you how people really live in this country and how the
Mm,
culture is really, functioning. So that's also nice to see.
right.
So, how do you actually work with people? You also mentioned you're working with digital nomads. I think you're also a personal trainer. So, this means you have contact with people as well.
Yeah, so I'm mostly focused on being a mindfulness meditation teacher. So I'm not doing a whole lot right now with personal training. That's more of just on request. So my primary focus is doing the mindfulness meditation sessions, and I do them every week. The sessions are called Meditate and Mingle. We get together and just first question I ask is, what are you bringing in today? What is present with you? And what do you need to get out of this session? And then transitioning into whatever the practice is. So, for example, tonight's practice that I led with people is called noting your judgments. And so we're just kind of bringing awareness to how we judge things and being aware of the labels that we're using and not judging those judgments, just acknowledging that, hey, sometimes we judge. And what label am I attaching to this situation, this thought, this feeling? So we did that, and then we had a conversation about that, and it usually lasts about an hour. And this evening was a whopper of a conversation. It actually went an hour and a half. It was incredible to me because I had two new people there that joined, and both of them shared, one of them particularly shared some really vulnerable information, like there's really deep trauma that she's been navigating as a result of just this one session. It kind of opened her up to recognizing some of these old patterns that had been coming up, and now that she has a bit more awareness how she can navigate those. She still has a challenging road ahead of her, but boy, I mean, talk about like moving and really providing meaning for me as a meditation teacher to be like, oh, wow, just even creating that space. And I didn't do anything. I just created the space, but she was able to come to that awareness on her own. But had she not come to that, she might not have made the time to do that because our lives are so busy. So I'm kind of riding on a high after that session this evening, and I'm looking forward to next week in the session that we have again together. So that to me, that's what fills my cup. When we talk about, what gives us meaning, that to me is what gives me meaning, and my purpose then is the vehicle that I guess that drives the meaning. And doing the mindfulness meditation coaching. Keep in mind, too, that mindfulness is an umbrella and meditation is just underneath that umbrella. We do mindful eating, we do mindful movement, we do mindful listening. There's ways that you can be mindful. Basically, you're just saying that you're being aware of the present moment without judgment, that you are just being. You're coming out of doing mode and going into being mode, which feels extremely self indulgent. But it's necessary in order for us to unwind and be present with what is. In that moment, we can kind of unpack it so that it doesn't unravel. There's a difference between unpacking and unraveling. So if we're able to unpack it, then we can kind of reorganize it as such. If it unravels, then that could happen at any given time. That could come at the worst possible time. And then there's a fallout from that we have to navigate. Creating that space is really important. But like I said, I don't think there was anything that I said during that time, but just kind of creating the space and using the guided practice just opened up a new awareness for her. And we were able to process through it and kind of provide different perspectives and reframe some things as well. One thing that she had said was that she was looking at some of the bad decisions that she had made. And this is a woman who, to me, she wasn't making bad decisions. She had this really traumatic experience as a child. These aren't bad decisions, they're trauma informed. And so then how do we help her extend compassion to herself for these trauma informed decisions that she has made over time that she's beating herself up about? And it's like, no, no, no. You were in an abnormal situation. And so your responses and your behaviors were abnormal. Abnormal divided by abnormal equals normal. So it's okay for you to have had these situations and to have navigated them from survival mode. But now that you have this awareness, you can do the work to shift your behaviors into something that you want more of. For her to say yes to more things rather than letting the fear lead her. No.
Yeah, I think what you
This is a really
said.
beautiful session.
Yeah, it's not always about doing a lot. It's also about just creating the space so the other person can unpack themselves. And like I said, unpacking, this sounds like this active action, like you are unpacking yourself. But unraveling, for me, this sounds like something is out of control. And this is not something that maybe you would like to have, because this sounds uncontrollable, something that you can't stop. So it's always better to unpack it in a safe environment and in a space that you create as a coach as well.
Well, yeah, and I wrote about this in my newsletter here last week. I'm in Hanoi, and my purpose here it really is to just be bored, because I've been going here, there, everywhere, and trying to stimulate myself this entire time through travel and through experiences. And in doing so, it's kind of left me feeling a bit numb to some experiences. So just kind of allowing myself to just be present with boredom. I feel like that's the greatest sin if you're a digital nomad. Well, when will I ever be in this city again? So I got to go and see this, and I got to go do this, and I got to experience this, and I got to do that. When I don't, you don't have to do all that. And so then how do you allow yourself to just be okay with just being and not giving into this insatiable desire to do everything? Because if you're a digital nomad, you have to carve out time for your work responsibilities as well. So how do you balance that? And I sent the survey out to some digital nomads. I know that you're working with digital nomads. So if anybody wants this survey, they can contact me. I'll send it to them because I'm curious, what are the challenges that digital nomads? One of the highest ones is balancing between the responsibilities that they have for work and adventure.
You feel like you need to go everywhere, but if you were just working from your home country, you wouldn't be like just running around every day like crazy. And I think this can also create more stress if you're always running around and trying to see everything. And in the end, the travel is burning you out. You went on an adventure to have this
Yes.
fun life, and now it's exhausting you. That's not the way, I would say.
Yeah. And that's sort of where I am getting to now after 30 months of this, is that I'm starting to burn out a bit. Luckily, on the horizon, I have a job lined up starting in August, either in Seoul or in Chiang Mai. So I've got two, but it's a win-win. I'm going to wind up in one of those two spots. And I'm actually really looking forward because they're both in-person jobs. What I'm starting to realize is that I'm not so much of a remote worker. I actually would like to be hybrid, but again, hybrid requires you to be in one city. And I'm actually looking forward to that. I think the challenging part was what city? What's this? Where do I want to rest? Right. And so where do I want to settle? And Seoul has spoken to me, but then this opportunity in Chiang Mai presented itself, and I could see myself in Chiang Mai too. So that feels good to know that I have those two opportunities on the horizon. I spent the first half of my life in the United States. I think it's okay for me to go and explore somewhere else for, well, you know what, the next 10 years or the next 20 years or what have you. Hopefully, we'll wind up in Portugal sometime in the last half of my life because
Okay.
Portugal is amazing.
Okay. And where can people find you? Of course, I will put all the links in the description as well. But mostly, where do you commonly hang out on the internet?
If people are interested in learning more about some of the meditate and mingle sessions, you can go to www.billylahr.com. You can sign up for the newsletter there as well. And if you sign up for the newsletter, then you get a free mindfulness starter course. So feel free to check that out. I also have a podcast. I'm not releasing any new episodes, but I have over 120 old episodes. So they'd be new to you if you wanted to listen to them. You can go to www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com. I'm also on Instagram, mindful_midlife_crisis. And I am on LinkedIn. It's Billy Lahr. Send me a message. I love knowing who listens to these conversations. I love knowing what resonates with you, the listener. And if you think I'm full of crap, send me a message and say, dude, I think you're full of crap and here's why. Let me know. I want to get that take too. I'm always open to feedback and having a conversation about it. That's part of being mindful, is being open, being curious, and understanding other people's perspectives.
Okay. So let people find you. And thank you very much for this conversation. It was interesting to see your take on mindfulness, and it's completely different, even. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being on the show.